hounds, chase ghosts, come sleep, watch out, demons are coming, run, sleep, hide, spirits, ghosts, hide, demons, hounds, ghosts, demons are coming, spirits, ghosts. Hello, my little hellhounds. Welcome to Home of Scares. If you like the chills running down your spine and to be scared, fueled with anxiety, then join us twice a week on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And don't forget to increase your anxiety levels. Just make sure you subscribe. Sleep tight, my hellhounds. Creepy neighbour and maybe attempted murder. Posted by ashy-autie. My friend Sally has had a bad run with neighbours, but this was one of the worst. Sally lives very close to me, about a 10-minute walk. We were both around 14 years old when this happened. We live rural, so we both have a lot of land. Me and Sally decided to go camping on her land. We bought cheap hammocks and went through the bushland. The days prior we spent clearing some of the razor grass with a cane knife to make a path. We probably should have worn long pants because we ended up with little cuts all over our legs and some on our arms. We set up our hammocks and brought quite a few blankets because it does get pretty cold at night, even though you're sweating throughout the day. We were still on her property and hadn't gone to her neighbour's boundary. Her neighbour had just leased the land to new tenants. Me and Sally were sitting on our hammocks, talking and laughing. This was around 9 p.m. We heard something in the bush. We just thought it was a wallaby. There's plenty of wallabies around here. Then we could see the figure of a man. We were whispering to each other, trying to see who it was. At first, we thought it was her brother. He came and scared us when we were camping previously. Then, as the person got closer, we were thinking it could have been her dad. It was dark and the bush looked the same from every angle. We realized the man was coming from the other direction than her house. We didn't dare move and covered our torches under our blankets. The man came up and said hi and introduced himself as Ben. Now, Ben was extremely drunk. He staggered around and he reeked of alcohol. He started saying how we had a nice little camp here and said something pretty unsettling. I'll have to come out and sunbake naked here on one of these hammocks. Me and Sally gave each other worried looks, but didn't say anything. It only got worse from there. I can't remember everything he said because it was a while ago and he was mumbling on for what felt like forever, but some of the things that stuck out were, "I'll have to kill yas," Wolf Creek style, and said, "You're nearly legal then," when he asked us our age. Ben was probably in his 40s. Me and Sally were texting each other while he was talking and coming up with an escape plan. He also offered us a puff on the magic dragon and pulled out a glass pipe. We declined. Sally said that we were leaving back to the house to make food. He told us to come back. We left our blankets and most of the stuff there and legged it. We told her dad what happened and we slept inside. The next morning we went back to our campsite to find everything burnt. A circle with probably a 20-meter radius was all burned. Coming from that circle was a line of burnt grass going towards the neighbour's house. I'm not a firefighter or do forensics, but it seemed obvious that some kind of fuel was used. Me and Sally were talking and it dawned on us the probability of Ben may have thought we were in the hammocks due to the pile of blankets. Ben was definitely drunk enough not to be able to tell the difference. We went and told Sally's dad, who then checked it out and then went next door. Ben's roommate answered the door and said Ben wasn't home and apologised, and even gave Sally's dad $50 for the blankets and hammocks. Nothing more happened for a few months. Sally told me at school about how Ben had been caught on camera sneaking around her yard. I went to her house after school because she was going to be home alone until her dad finished work. I ended up sleeping over there that night. That's when he came over. Ben was drunk and came out the front of Sally's house and started yelling. He accused Sally of stealing his dog. Sally's dad called the police. They arrested him. The next day we found a knife in the yard. It wasn't from Sally's house. The police came again and we told them about the knife, and they got the footage from the cameras as well. I don't know what happened to Ben, but he no longer lives next to Sally, so Ben, let's never meet again. Weird Hitchhiker, posted by AlloDole21. Okay, So let me take you back to a weird encounter I had with this hitchhiker. It was midwinter last year. My brother and I were going to our grandparents' house. The route we took was pretty scenic, and it isn't a usual road people take to go to where we were going. Since there's easier and faster ways. As we drove past a certain road, there was this guy wearing a really busted looking flannel jeans, shoes and a cap. At first we just thought he was going to get picked up by someone, since hitchhikers isn't a big thing from where I'm from. Anyways, my brother looks at me and says, "You reckon we should help him?" Me being the crime junkie I am, I shook my head and said, "Nah, he's probably waiting for someone specific." We arrived to my grandparents and have a good time there. The time we left was probably around 10 PM and it was pretty dark already. My brother took the same way back, as we just like the views and longer drives. He was trying to be funny and drive real fast. As he did, we literally zoomed past the same man. I told him to go back, since it's been like 3 or 4 hours since we last saw him. My brother hesitated at first, but then did a U-turn. When we got back to the guy, we asked if he wanted a ride, and he says yeah to X, Y and Z, and we said sure, why not, since we're going to pass straight through there anyways. When he got into the back seat, the first thing we noticed was the smell. He reeked. Then when I offered him a water bottle, we keep a spare in the seat compartment, he took it. He didn't look homeless or anything, so I didn't suspect that he was, but I did notice he had hella scratches on his arms. I brushed it off and just kept looking at the road. The drive was silent. When we arrived where he said to go, he hopped out of the car, and my brother decided to wait until he went into the house. When we waited, the guy looked back and just stood there. I got a bit uneasy and told my brother to just drive off. He ended up doing so, but I feel so guilty that maybe something bad had happened and it was our fault. So for the next 3 weeks, I kept checking for any news around that area, but nothing popped up. I even asked officers to do a wellness check there, but they couldn't, as I didn't actually know anyone there personally. So yeah, that was my little experience with a weird hitchhiker. I have a few more weird encounters, but I want to see how this goes before I write about my other ones. Brutal break-in, posted by Allodole21. I made a post yesterday about my experience with a hitchhiker on a separate subreddit, not thinking that today I'd be writing about a break-in that happened a couple of hours ago. Yes, I am perfectly fine. My boyfriend and I were just enjoying our usual Saturday movie nights. Yeah, no chill because he's boring like that. Now, to explain, his house has a back door near the kitchen. We were in the living room upstairs. He only moved in recently and I was absent to see the house tours and whatnot since COVID and studies. I didn't think I needed to either, as I wasn't planning on moving in with him just yet. I went downstairs to grab some snacks from the kitchen. I heard a few rustling and noises outside. I ignored it, but me being a crime junkie, I let my boyfriend know, just in case. He brushed it off lightly, saying it's probably just a cat. I asked how the crime rate of this area was, and he just shushed me to stop being paranoid. To give an example of my boyfriend, for the next bit of this, he's 6'3", built and collects hunting knives for fun. Since we were upstairs, we didn't hear the initial break-in. It wasn't until I wanted a cuppa I went back downstairs to turn on the kettle. Then I realised the back sliding door was slightly left open. A sudden wave of anxiousness went past me and I ran up to my boyfriend. I told him what I saw and he said that maybe I'm just overreacting. He decided to call it a night since it was about 12 AM and we both worked during the day. As we were going to bed, we heard a drawer open downstairs. My boyfriend grabbed a bat and went downstairs. Me being the pussy I am, I stayed upstairs. All of a sudden, I start hearing yelling and shouting. So I run downstairs to see my boyfriend swing his bat at this guy. I kept shouting at him to stop, which he did. The offender had the audacity to look up at me and say, "Shoulda just raped ya." I was beyond disgusted and mad. So, as he was on the ground, I kicked him in his stomach. It was late at night and I didn't want my boyfriend getting in trouble for GBH or anything like that. So we let the offender go, and just to be sure, I called my police friend and told him separately what happened. But yeah, after a long shower with him and me crying and 3 cups of tea later, I decided to post this on Reddit to make me feel a little better. Please, for goodness sake, stay safe and always stay paranoid. The Neighbour, posted by Bree8907. So this took place some years ago, but it still creeps me out to this day. I was staying with my then boyfriend at the time in his apartment. He lived on the lower level. He had what seemed like a really cool neighbour. We will call him Dan. Well, Dan was a heavy-set, middle-aged man, around 40, white, and didn't have any kids or wife, etc. He liked younger girls though, and he liked to pay them for their services. You know, the ones similar to Backpages, but only post Backpage days. My BF one day decided to joke with him and says, well, if you like to pay, how about my girlfriend? Shows you her boobs and you pay both of us. As he laughs it off because he can feel my piercing stare directed straight through him, as if to say, yeah, you've lost your damn mind. Boyfriend knows I'm not that type of girl and never have been, so I'm guessing that was made it all the more funny to him. But anyways, one night Dan asked my boyfriend to take him to the store for beer, and he did. Well, at the store there was a clerk. She was a pretty little petite blue-eyed blonde-haired girl, around 22 years old, that Dan liked but was too shy to approach. So my boyfriend, trying to be Hitch or some shit for Dan, was able to get her number for him. Well, a week or so goes by and Dan comes and knocks on the door and tells my boyfriend that the clerk, we'll call April, agreed to come over and hang out with him once she got off work. Dan didn't have a car and neither did she, so he paid my boyfriend gas money to take him to the store to pick her up. We all rode to go pick April up and she came over and we're all talking and drinking until they decided to retreat upstairs to Dan's apartment. She stayed overnight with him and left the next morning, so I'm assuming she rendered him some services that night, because that following morning Dan was super happy and telling my boyfriend about how he enjoyed her company the night before. Well, this goes on for about 3 weekends, and let me say this, from my interactions with April, I could tell she had some sort of habit, drug or alcohol, because she would appear inebriated every time I'd seen her, and not that I'm judging, because I'm not, and I kind of didn't blame her. She was doing the shit strictly for the money and no pleasure. Dan was way out of her league and he knew it, and she wasn't sexually attracted to him, so she felt she had to be high or drunk AF to screw him. Dan seemed really nice, but he just had something strange about him that I couldn't pinpoint exactly. Well, it started to get old to April to the point Dan had to beg like hell and offer her more money for her time. So she agreed to another nightly tryst, but it would end different this time, and April had no clue of what was to come. We picked her up as usual and they went straight to his apartment. A couple of hours go by and we can hear knocking and banging upstairs. You know, like the sounds of people having hard sex. My boyfriend proceeds to comment, "Damn, he's fucking the shit out of her." Then we hear running and loud stomps back and forth on the floor upstairs. Not knowing the hell is going on, we hear Dan yelling, 1, 2, 3, counting. At this point it was really starting to piss me off, to where I was going to tell my boyfriend to go knock on the damn door and tell them we're trying to sleep. But then a moment later, all was silent. We fell asleep only to be woken up by siren lights. We were oblivious to what was going on, and it was late, so we went back to sleep. But the next morning we found out Dan was taken to jail for the murder of April. Come to find out, that strange thing I couldn't quite pinpoint that was weird about him was his sadistic fetishes. That night Dan had tied April up with a cord, bounding her feet and hands together and putting a collar or some sort around her neck, as well to choke her and restrict her air supply. He left out of the room for some reason, leaving her to suffocate to death. The sounds of counting we heard was him trying to do CPR on her lifeless body. My boyfriend believed it was an accident, simply because he felt Dan was a nice guy and didn't seem like the type to do something like that. But I beg to differ. I feel he was falling in love or obsessed with her and knew he couldn't have her, so he wanted no one else to be able to either. It just goes to show, behind smiling faces they can mask pure evil. Dan will never see daylight to be able to do this to another woman again. Sometimes I think if only my boyfriend would have never gotten her number for Dan, she'd still be alive today. But then I think, no, it would then only had happened to another woman instead. My dad's friend, posted by Guava Signal 6901. I don't know if this is that interesting, but it really creeps me out to this day. I was in 6th grade, and every day after school I usually walk home up this hill. The bus stop isn't that far from my house, so I never really questioned my safety while walking home. I end school at 3:10, but get home around 4:30, and my mum goes to work from 2 till 10:30 p.m. I never really knew my dad's schedule, and every day one of my 4 brothers would be home waiting for me. That day I was walking home and a man on a bike was riding on the sidewalk across from me. He kept staring at me, but I didn't think it was such a big deal at first. I started walking further and I noticed he was going the same way as me. My mum warned me that whenever this happens I should call her or take the other route home, because there was 2. I didn't want to bother her, so I took the other route home, but I noticed the man on the bike took the usual route that I take on a daily basis. I assumed that he was a neighbour I'd never seen before. Finally I got home and I saw my dad in the garage talking to the guy on the bike. I felt this really weird feeling in my stomach. I said hi to my dad and he introduced the guy on the bike as one of his close friends for years. Keep in mind that we are a close family, so I pretty much know all of my parents' friends. I quickly let go of all of the bad thoughts going through my head, as went on with my after school routine. The next morning I told Mum about it, and we saw the same guy that morning in our garage. Turns out my mum has never seen that man before. If my dad and this guy were so close, how come my mum has never heard of him? For a few months I kept seeing this guy around my house and steered clear of him. By now he was familiar with everyone's schedule, so he knows when no one is home and when I come from school. One day I decided to get off at my friend's bus stop so we could walk to 7-Eleven and get candies and snacks. Since I got off at her bus stop, I got home earlier than usual. When I got there, one of my older brothers was sitting on the steps because he forgot his keys and he wanted to change before he went to skate with his friends. So me and him entered the house at the same time. The guy who rides the bike was in the house alone, stealing my dad's money and other valuables. When he saw us, he pulled out a sharp object. My older brother is much larger than him, so he quickly got the weapon out of his hand and held him down. I quickly called my dad and he called the police. Everything got handled pretty quickly thanks to my brother. They questioned the guy and he said he was planning to rob us. Then silence. Anyone who tried to stop him, even though it got handled, I still dwell on it. What if my brother decided to go skate with his friends without changing? What if my brother couldn't get the weapon out of his hand? What if I got home at my regular time and the guy ended up taking all my dad's money? My biggest concern is what if I entered the house alone? He knew I've been cautious around him. What if he purposely did the robbery right before I would get home from school? I don't know, but I still have these thoughts. After all that, we put cameras all around the outside of the house to ensure no one would get in unless they've been invited in. Always watch out for strangers and follow your gut, even if your parents say the person is safe. Update. To start, no, my dad was or is not a drug dealer or user, and he was never incarcerated. I've asked him and his answers seem genuine, so I believe him. Moving on to the second most asked question, how did they meet? They met when my dad was younger at his first job, when they were around 16, before him and my mother started dating. They were close friends for about a year until the guy started hanging out with other people and they fell off. When my dad was 18, him and my mum started dating, so that would explain why she never knew about him. A few months prior to the incident, the guy and my dad reconnected through the guy's sister. She explained that he was having a hard time and fell in with the wrong crowd. His sister knew of my dad because the guy never really made much friends, and he always mentioned how my dad was one of his good friends. My dad, being a nice guy, offered to help him out, and they decided to meet that first day I walked home from school. The guy didn't own a car and lived in a motel for a while, which explained why he was riding a bike on our first encounter. The The guy kept coming to our house for a few weeks because him and my dad were catching up. Like I mentioned before, my dad owns his own shipping business. He offered the guy a job because he knew he didn't have much money. The guy worked there for about 4 weeks, and my dad was paying him weekly to help him get back on his feet. Spending all that time at my dad's workplace and at our house, the guy adapted to our schedules. Even my mum got used to him being around. I asked my dad if he saw the guy acting weird any time before the incident, and he said he noticed the guy asking a bunch of questions, and a few things went missing at his workplace where he offered the guy a job. A shipping business plus my dad's regular job is a lot to keep up with, so my dad assumed that it was his fault that some things turned up missing. Turns out that the guy was stealing little by little until the day he got caught. I also found out that the day prior to the incident, the guy asked all my brothers where they would be the next day, which is probably how he knew that one of my brothers would be out skating with his friends, like I mentioned before. I'm still not sure on if it was set up so that I would be home alone with him. Keep in mind that I only arrived 10 minutes home than when I usually do. Also, when me and my brother caught him, most of the money he wanted was already packed in a duffel bag. In 10 minutes he would have been done with whatever he was trying to accomplish. As for what happened to the guy, I'm not sure because I didn't want to ask. I felt uncomfortable and I didn't want to put my dad in that place. Keep in mind, at the time of the actual incident, I was only in 6th grade, about 11 or 12 years old, so they didn't give me much information because they felt I was too young. That's the reason why lots of things were left out. Young girl alone on a bus with a very creepy driver and his friend. Posted by Bex4673. This happened to me when I was 15 in 2005. I'm 30 now, and this situation still gives me the creeps to this day when I think of what might have happened. I had a part-time job at a seaside pleasure fair bowling alley since the age of 14. I would work after school and at weekends for extra money. My mum was a single parent with 2 kids, and money was hard to come by. Working didn't bother me, and I loved having money to spend on myself every 2 weeks. I had a boyfriend from school at the time, and his parents were rich AF and lived in a fancy part of town just outside the city. I agreed to spend time with him at his house one night after work, and his mum would take me home at around 10:30 or so. The problem was I had to catch 2 buses to get to his house. The first bus took me to the outskirts of the city centre, and from there the second bus would take me within 15 minutes walking distance of his house. I hopped on the second bus and it was quite full with other passengers, so I felt safe and comfortable. The way the bus route went was that it had to drive out past the city limits to quite a rural area where the terminus was, and then on the way back into the city is where I would get off and walk to my boyfriend's house. Every stop on the way out of the city, the other passengers were getting off. I was getting more and more nervous the more people disembarked, and I was hoping that maybe 1 or 2 people would be left on the return journey into the city. 1 male passenger was left. We get to the bus terminus and it's just me, the driver, and as I discovered, the lone male passenger was the driver's friend. So the bus pulls into the terminus and it's really dark out. I think it was winter. In Scotland, the nights draw in at around 4 p.m. I finished work at 6 p.m. and it must have been maybe 7:30 p.m. by the time we get to the terminus. The terminus is completely deserted, no streetlights, no other people, no other buses, just me and these 2 males on the bus. The driver then turns off the engine and the bus falls into complete darkness and silence. He steps out of the driving cab and informs me that it was time for him to take a break and we would get going again in 15 minutes. I squeak a nervous "okay" from the seat halfway up the bus. The driver and his friend then step out of the bus to have a smoke. This was back when smartphones and Facebook were not a thing. I had a pink Motorola Razr flip phone, so there was nothing to distract me from the creepy darkness and the silence over the deserted bus terminus. I'm on high alert, of course, and all my senses are now in overdrive. I could hear the bus driver and his friend whisper talking from outside of the bus, and I was catching snatches of their conversation. They were speaking about their latest conquests with women and partying, etc. They were laughing and joking about how the driver's friend had slept with this one girl that was completely drunk and passed out at a party and was dared to do it by his friends. I'm sitting there in total shock thinking, what the fuck am I going to do if they try to start anything with me? I'm helpless out here by myself. So I have my mum's number ready to call her when they come back on the bus. They spot me and share a look and a grin. They slowly walk up the bus towards me and start up a conversation with me. They start asking me uncomfortable questions like, "Hey girlie, what's your name? How old are you? Where are you going? Do you have a boyfriend? Are you a virgin?" etc. The questions were getting progressively more disturbing, and I was trying to be polite and answer them, but give as little information as possible without trying to seem so fucking terrified as I was feeling on the inside. This went on for a while, and they were being very leery and suggesting crude things to me. The Spanish Inquisition only stopped when, from the driver's cab, came a call over the radio to this bus driver. The 2 creeps snapped out of their interrogation of me, and the driver must have realised he had gone over his break time. As he scurried to his radio, he spoke back into the radio and said that he was just finishing up his break and would be leaving now. He pokes his head around the Perspex cab door and smiles at his mate and said something to the effect of, "Got to cut this short, pal." He's got back into the driver's seat and started up the engine, and the bus rumbled back into life with all the lights coming back on. The driver's friend looks at me and smiles before walking to the front of the bus to carry on his conversation with the driver. I am shaking from fear. I am so utterly terrified, but thanking God for the call from the radio. We drive 10 minutes back towards the city centre, and I press the bell to get off at my stop. The bus was the kind that only had one way on and off, and I would have to go to the front of the bus, past the creepy friend and driver to get off. I wait until just before the bus pulls up to the stop and practically run past the two creeps and off the bus. They catcall me the second I get off the bus, and I can hear them laughing and jeering at me as the bus pulls away from the stop. I run to my boyfriend's house, where I collapse into his arms and cry my little face off at his front door. His mum hears the commotion and comes back to check what's going on. I tell her the whole story, and she just hugs me fiercely and tells me I'm safe now. She asks if I wanted to go home, and I tell her yes through my tears and sobs. So she and my boyfriend drive me home immediately, where my worried mum is waiting for me. My boyfriend's mum had called her before we left their house. My mum wanted to make a complaint to the bus company, but being a very embarrassed 15-year-old, I begged her not to. I was scared they would somehow find me and exact revenge. I still have a fear of being alone on buses to this day. I try to avoid them at all costs. Dennis Rodman, I hope we never meet again. Posted by Luna88. Here's what happened 2 years ago. In complete honesty, I was 29 in the airport, heading back home to Fort Lauderdale from a long work conference. They called for everyone to start boarding the flight. I, as usual, waited until last to board because I don't see the hurry in boarding first. I get annoyed by the crowds that rush to get on or off a flight. As I'm finally getting up to board the plane, I notice a very tall guy, sunglasses, piercings, weird outfit, loud as hell, also getting up to board. It dawned on me that it was Dennis Rodman, Dr. I immediately texted my husband, who said that I must get a pic with him. We line up to board and I see a kid run up to him for an autograph. Dr. obliged and signed something for him. They then scanned our tickets and we waited to get onto the plane. There were a couple of guys behind us and in front of us, all staring at him. Dr. cracked a few jokes and I noticed his voice was slurring a bit. He has definitely been drinking. I took a breath and said, "Excuse me, I'm so sorry to fangirl, but would I be able to take a pic with you?" He turned towards me and smiled. A clever, "Oh yeah, you want my autograph, huh?" grin. He said alright, let's do this, or something like that. I gave my phone to one of the guys next to me, and then DR stood next to me and gave me a hug. His hands embraced my torso, and his hands brushed clumsily all over my breasts. It wasn't an accident, they were gropes, and he wouldn't let go of me. The guys surrounded us immediately, noticed and chucked and whispered amongst themselves. I shut down. I got so embarrassed and just broke away from the hug and giggles nervously. I didn't know how to react, and I felt so stupid and angry for it. But it didn't stop there. DR then asked where I was sitting, to which I replied, trying to be clever, I don't know, by the back, not in first class. He grabbed my ticket and said, okay, we're gonna make this happen. I'm gonna sit next to you. My heart dropped. I did not want to sit next to him. We boarded the plane and he followed me all the way to the back where my seat was, way past his first class seat. Everyone was staring. My heart was racing. We finally got to my row, and there's my empty window seat, with the next two occupied by a guy in the middle seat and a woman on the aisle. He then asked the guy if he wanted to sit in first class so that he could sit next to me. I'd really like to stay and sit next to my wife, said the guy in the middle seat. Thank God he did not to move for DR. I go, sorry, it was nice meeting you. DR awkwardly rushed back down the plane to first class. I sat and felt as if everyone was staring at me, wondering who I was. I ignored them and put my headphones on and breathed a sigh of relief that it was all over. I took my time getting off the plane and didn't run into him again. I still kicked myself for not reacting in a more courageous manner, but it was such a weird situation. Dennis Rodman, you're creepy AF. Let's never meet again. She tried to lure us into her car, posted by Clownery111. This happened a few years ago when I was 16 or maybe 17. I don't remember. I was chilling with my best friend of the same age in this kinda empty street. I live in a big city and it was broad daylight, but this street was always like that. Some people walked by, but it was mostly cars. We were sitting somewhere in this street and drinking Red Bull with my friend, listening to some music. Then a big black car stopped in front of us. An old lady was inside, looking sort of rich. She seemed to be wearing nice clothes and jewellery, and her hair was well done. First I thought she was going to ask us something, like most people do, but as soon as she opened her mouth, I knew something was off. The way she talked was weird, just weird. I don't really know how to explain. I was like hearing someone on too much Xanax or opioid. I remember asking myself if she was on drugs. This kind of slow and slightly slurred speech. She said she could buy us alcohol and beers. And then she insisted on how pretty we were, how she could buy us nice things if we get into her car. My friend was very tense since the beginning, but she looked at me slightly panicked when the old lady said this. We both knew there was absolutely no way in the world that we would get into this car. I said to the lady that if she wanted to buy us nice things, she could just give it to us right there, but she kept saying she could give us a ride. I kept looking around and in the back of the car to see if there was any men with her, ready to run away with my friend. At this point my adrenaline was going wild and I had flashbacks of the movie Taken and the kidnapping. I was ready to leave the spot with my friend when the old lady finally understood we weren't going into her car. When she left, my friend and I moved and found a different spot. We talked about it and what the lady was planning for us. We agreed it was probably a sex trafficking network because all the red flags, the old lady to gain our trust, the comments on our appearances, and how she wanted us to get drunk with the beers. After that, my biggest regret is that I didn't take a picture of the car or the immatriculation number, and the thought of the other girls getting kidnapped by this lady is haunting me, and I really hope no one got in this damn car. Well, thanks for listening, my little hellhounds. Remember, if you have any stories you would like to submit, post them to my subreddit r/homeofscares. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like for more scary, creepy encounters like these. Good night, my little hellhounds.